Hello, and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne. We all know that life is hard, right? It's messy, it's unpredictable, but it can be wonderful all at the same time. My hope is that we can take a deep dive into self-development topics and explore life's lessons through book clubs, conversations, and interviews. And together, we can uncover the lessons that others have already learned to help us navigate this crazy, wonderful ride called life. Hello and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne. Today I have Elena Nicole with me. Elena is a certified health coach, personal trainer, wife, mother, and owner of Elena Nicole Health. Elena helps busy women who want to get healthier to look and feel their best, but in a realistic and sustainable way. She works with her clients to develop habits and routines in the areas of mindset, nutrition, and movement so they can reach their goals and maintain them. Hello, Elena. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
I'm glad you're here, and all of the topics that you love and are passionate about, my group will really love. So I think this will be a great conversation.
Yeah.
So one of the things that continues to show up everyone I talk to is that life is messy and it's not a direct path to where we end up.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times our mess becomes our message.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a discovery call before, and I think you're about to tell us how that is true for you as well. So I won't spoil it. I'll let you give your history, but I think it would be super helpful if you could set the backdrop by giving us a little bit of your story and how you got to this place where you're now working in a space where you're really passionate about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And I love that whole concept of the podcast, which is a big reason why I was so excited to be on. You just have to embrace all of it, right? And it's when you don't, you fight it, that you really struggle, which is kind of, I think, why the majority of my life I did struggle in so many areas, including health, which is a big reason that I became a health coach. But really for me, it started off as early as I remember is like middle school age. And I just remember struggling to fit in, just wanting to kind of look like everyone else around me. And I didn't. My skin was a little darker. My hair was different. I had a twin sister. I had just moved into the area. And for me, it kind of became, what can I control here? What can I make look a certain way to get to this idea of what I thought was perfection? And based on what I saw around me, I grew up in the 90s. Everyone was dieting and going to different meetings and trying different plans. It was my weight. It was my body. It was my weight. I naturally had, a little bit of a thicker build. So I just kind of figured, I can get skinny. I can straighten my hair and things will be perfect. Of course, that's not how it works. Ever. And now I know that for sure, but it took me a really long time to get there. And, back then I distinctly remember one of my very first memories of all of this was sitting in a Weight Watchers meeting with my mom. I remember the chairs that they set up in the rooms before you go in, not for me, but because my parents would attend things like that, as most adults did that I knew. And just kind of looking around and seeing all the women there and, bringing their points and weighing in. And what I remember seeing was everyone going out to eat afterwards, after they got their number. Not saying there's anything wrong with that at all, but I just remember thinking there's got to be a better way. There's got to be more to this. And that could work for many people, but I think it was that intention that I perceived around it that I had a problem with at the time. And like I mentioned, I was young. I was back, in middle school age, but I think a seed was kind of planted for me that I don't want to be doing these things. Little did I know, I would fall right into that same trap, struggling with body image as a lot of girls do when they're younger. And like I mentioned before, it was kind of my thing that I was like, well, if I get to this perfect size, life will be great. So, I fell into those same traps. I did different diets. I tried Atkins. I tried South Beach. I counted calories. I would go days without eating. Sometimes if I wasn't, like restricting, I was binging or dieting. It was one of those three things that I used to find myself doing. Looking back on it now was kind of just grasping at straws, looking for that validation for myself outside of myself. It didn't even stop with eating. When I wasn't finding that validation, like I said, or that acceptance, I would go and try other things to kind of fill that void. So it would be shopping, it was dating. As I got older, it became alcohol. So it just kind of was this ongoing spiral because I didn't have my own back. It wasn't getting kind of those things from within. And now I can look back on it and see that. But at the time I had no idea. And even if somebody would have told me, probably wouldn't have believed or listened to them. I would have just said, no, I just need to lose 10 more pounds. So anyways, that kind of spiraled on from there. It really continued through high school, college. Then as I was starting to get into the workforce and my career, I would work crazy late hours. I would job hop because I thought that was the answer then. So that was really like a summary of a lot of my struggles. But really, to take it kind of back to health is when things really started to shift for me was I actually got into a very unhealthy relationship for a couple of years and ended up gaining about 25 pounds in those 2 years, and kind of just isolated myself from everything else I had been doing in my life. I wasn't working out anymore. I wasn't eating healthy at all and had literally completely let myself go. And when that relationship ended, I kind of took a look at what had happened and made a promise to myself that I would never do that again. And that's when I really think I started to open my eyes to what I had been doing all along. And unfortunately, we had to go through that situation to really see it clearly, and started shifting things a little bit. Started looking back into all the research I had done when I was younger, doing all those diets and seeing like, okay, what do I want to do here? How can I make some small improvements? That was where it started to shift for me. And after that, I started diving into a little bit more of like the psychology behind eating, and found something that had been missing during my whole journey, which is that mindset piece. And actually stumbled upon, there's a website called Creative Live, and I don't even know if it still exists because this was years ago. And I was in like graphic design and marketing at the time, and they did a lot on that. And they had nutrition section. So I ended up stumbling on a psychology of eating course on there. There was a woman named Daria Rose, who was a psychologist who taught it. And she talked all about why we do the things that we do and how everything is driven by our thinking, and thoughts create our feelings, which produce our actions and drive our results. That was such an aha wake up for me, because I literally just never thought about that. I don't know that I knew it, and I never understood that it actually mattered, in day-to-day life. So really from there, it kind of went on to listening to podcasts on psychology of eating, and then diving into the world of coaching. But kind of mixed in there, I ended up going to therapy. After I had my daughter, I dealt with a little bit of depression. So I ended up going to therapy for that, started to almost be forced to talk through a lot of my feelings and thoughts that I was having that I had never done before. So for me, that's when I started uncovering a lot of the unproductive and, negative things that I thought and would say about myself. And along the way, started to talk a lot about my history with dieting and disordered eating behavior and binge eating and emotional eating and all of those types of things. Started to realize why I was doing a lot of those things and make the connection. So that was another big shift for me. And then after that, I got certified as a personal trainer because I really still did love health, but wanted to help people in so much more of a productive, healthy way than I had experienced as I was going through my journey. So got certified as a personal trainer, but really knew there was more to it than just exercise. So then went into holistic health coaching, got certified as a health coach. But, along the way, as I got to that last leg of my journey and I was really diving into like the psychology and the mindset piece of it, I started to lose weight and get to a place with my body that I had wanted to be the whole time, but it was almost like in an effortless way. And I don't want to say effortless because I ate the fruits and vegetables. I went to the gym, but it wasn't a way of taking care of myself. It came from this place of confidence and care versus that like desperation and lack that it had started out with in the beginning. So many times you can be taking the same actions, but what they're fueled by is what makes all the difference. So I ended up getting to that place, after that long, messy journey, but learning so much along the way.
I actually have a bunch of things running through my head that I actually didn't plan to say or talk to you about. One of them is around, last night I was actually talking to a different coach and we were bringing up how you can't tell by looking at somebody what their life is like. Yeah. And I'm saying that because we're going to be on a podcast. And I can say this because you just shared your deepest, darkest secrets with us. And externally, guys, she's gorgeous. She has, the whole package. And I'm not saying that to make you feel weird, but my point is just, we really never know what people are going through or have on their shoulders or where they have come from. And I just think, when you were talking and giving all that history and I'm looking at you and I'm saying, this is like a perfect example of that. And people need to remember that, because what you see on Facebook or what you see when somebody's just out on the street, you just have no idea what people are going through.
So true. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So thank you for letting me say that, because I didn't want it to come off weird, but I think it's an important thing for people to think about. One of the things that I've heard you say when I was doing some research on you is you openly share that though you've really restructured your thought patterns and your behaviors and all those things, you still do have some thoughts that creep in there.
Oh, yeah.
Some of those, I'll say obsessive or negative thoughts that can be sabotaging. And I think it's so important for people to hear. You can be years into this either health journey or even just mindset journey, whatever, like a transformation, and it still creeps in.
100% every single day. I mean, just, silly little examples. Like I get up early in the morning to work out. It's just what works best for my schedule. And every single morning I have that back and forth in my brain of like not wanting to do it. Like go back to bed. You can do it tomorrow. You don't need to do this, like all of those thoughts. It's just a matter of getting really good at talking back to them. So that's, one thing. And the other is even with the emotional eating, I have a day that I'm feeling stressed or, I have a 6-year-old little girl. There are lots of challenges. And my brain still sometimes goes back to those old patterns of, okay, stress, eat. Times of high emotion, go grab a snack, like ice cream. Like I literally have like those visions sometimes even in my mind. And it's now because I've been working on shifting them for so long that I've gotten really good at it, but I absolutely still have them. They still play on a regular basis, daily basis. It's just that you get really good at being like, nope, we're not going to do that. That's not what I really want. 100%. Yeah, definitely.
I love that honesty. And I think you almost said it. I was waiting to see if you said it. I think one of the things that you say and you kind of use as one of your mantras is, I don't do that anymore. Something very similar to that, right? So tell me about that. What's that self-talk look like when something going on in the day? And is that something you literally just say to yourself?
Oh, yeah. Just one example is I kind of just talked about it a little bit, but I used to do kind of like a weekend binge. Literally, I would eat Monday through Friday, super clean. And then Friday through Sunday night, I would eat anything and everything that I possibly could get my hands on. Really, nothing was off limits and not in like a positive way. It was open my mouth, everything goes in. And it was taking all of the emotion from the week is what I would do and numb it, like shove it down until I got to the weekend and then distract myself from it all weekend with food and alcohol and whatever else. And even now on Mondays, sometimes starting in that beginning of the week, I start almost dreaming about that weekend binge I used to have. And I still have those thoughts that pop in, like I gave the example of, okay, something annoying happens at work. And I automatically think, okay, like Friday night wine. It just kind of goes to that. And I do literally think to myself, I don't always say it out loud, that we're not going to do that. I don't need to do that to get through this. That's kind of more what it is now is I don't need to do that to get through this. Doesn't mean I won't drink the wine. It's more a matter of I don't need it to deal with what I have going on Monday, if that makes sense. But yeah.
Yeah, it makes complete sense.
I do talk to myself out loud though sometimes, especially if I'm home by myself, depending on what the situation is. A lot of times I find myself at the pantry. That's a super common thing. I've talked to a lot of people that during the day, especially like when we all started working at home during pandemic, boredom eating was like a big thing. Not even boredom because we all had things to do, a lot of us, but it was just mindless. You find yourself at the pantry. And I will say out loud to myself, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing right now? Why am I looking to eat? Because so many times you just have to like wake yourself up out of that subconscious fog you end up in. So I will 100% like say that out loud to myself. As crazy as that sounds.
I totally get that. That's one of the things I have to watch. I'll call it a distraction, right? It's more about, like you said, I could have 8 million things to do, but I'm looking for a little distraction. And that's where you just naturally go. There's, of course, a bunch of healthier things you could do, but that's sort of the go-to, right? So you have to watch that. So you talked about talking to yourself and sort of having these mantras that you can say. What would you say, or what do you teach as some of the other best practices or strategies around trying to transition people from these patterns of obsessive food thoughts or, negative beliefs and that kind of stuff? Like, what are some of the strategies that you teach?
Well, number one is you have to be aware of it. You have to start paying attention to what is going on. So if you have like a specific struggle or challenge, you have to like sit down and listen to what you're thinking and saying about it to yourself and about yourself. I'll give another example. When I was like at one phase of my journey, I had about, 8 to 10 more pounds that I wanted to lose, like to get back to, a certain size, whatever it was, just a place where I felt good really is what it looked like. And I remember somebody asking me, oh, you had this goal, like, how are you doing on it? And I remember saying out loud to them, I just can't get there. Like, I can't do it. And I was like, I heard it. And I was like, what the heck did I just say? And I remember on my car ride home that day, I was like, why did I just shut myself down like that? Why did I just block off any opportunity or thought that it was possible for me to do it? Of course it was possible. Like I was just, not making the time. Maybe it wasn't a priority, whatever it was. I needed some kind of support. Who knows? But it wasn't that I couldn't. I certainly could. So it's literally like starting to pay attention and become aware. In that situation, it wasn't even intentional, but you can like do it by journaling, or I always encourage people to just do like a brain dump of thoughts in a notebook with a pen about whatever your challenge is, and start writing down like, okay, what are your thoughts about this? And why do you feel like you're stuck? And so many times it's eye-opening just to see that out of your head on paper. And it's called being the watcher of your thoughts, actually kind of almost separating yourself from what's going on in your brain. And that can be really amazing to do. And then you can kind of decide like, okay, what do I want to put back in there? What's actually going to get me closer to where I want to go? But you can't even do that until you start to make the focused intentional effort to become aware of it. Driving, if you're someone who does a decent amount of driving in silence, is a great place to do it. And ask yourself questions in your mind or even out loud, because when you give your brain something to look for, that's its job. It's going to do it. So whatever questions, I love the quote, I'm not sure who says it, the quality of your life is determined by the questions you ask. And that's also the questions you ask yourself. So it's not just questions you ask other people, but when you give yourself good questions to focus on, you're going to get good answers. And then you start to look at it in phases: awareness, analysis, action. So basically that second phase is analysis. So you have all this information, all the thoughts that you have going on in your head, and then you start to look at them and question them. Is this really what I want to be thinking? Is it getting me to where I want to be? And then the third phase is the action. Okay, how can I shift this now that I'm aware of it to turn it into something that's actually going to be more productive and help me get to where I want? So for me, instead of I can't, it was, how can I? How can I get here? What can I do? I have this other thing that I call power questions that are like shifting those when you're in a place where you're saying I can't, or I don't have time, or all the limiting beliefs, listing them all out, literally turning them around. What do I have time for? Like, how can I? What do I have time for? What do I know? How can I figure this out? Who can I ask? Turning that around so you can focus on the positive and the productive versus the non.
It makes me think, and I always bring this up, Elizabeth Benton, I love her. She wrote Chasing Cupcakes. I don't know if you know her, but she always talks about trying to find another perspective, right? Like what else can be true? And then questioning it that way and coming at it from multiple perspectives. And it sounds like exactly what you're saying. And I think a lot of it is training ourselves to do that. And then the other thing, when you were talking about the thought and kind of separating yourself from the thoughts, that ties into the book we're reading now, which is Dr. Amy Johnson's Just a Thought. So good, because I think that's such a hard concept for people to get their arms around, that we aren't our thoughts and that our thoughts just can be out there, but they don't really have to mean anything until we put meaning to them or we act on them. And so separating yourself and sort of seeing yourself as a third party to them,
exactly,
questioning them, I think that's a great exercise to do.
Yeah. And just realizing they're just ideas. They're just sentences in your mind. They don't really, like you said, have to mean anything. And they certainly don't have to drive action. If you're able to slow down, you choose to slow down, you can kind of pause and then decide what action you actually want to take, which is another really, really key practice in this whole thing.
So you just made me think of, again, a different interview, but I was talking to another coach, Matty Lansdowne, and he's from Australia. And he talked about, this was sort of the funniest example, but about what you just said, pausing and realizing that your thought is something you don't have to act on. And he said to me, have you ever thought of anything like really crazy, like something you just, you wanted to hurt somebody, or you just wanted to do something so crazy, but you didn't. You didn't do it, right? It was just a thought because we didn't do it. And I thought, wow, that's a really great, tangible thought for people to kind of get their head around the concept. And it's so true. Like, come on, we've all had that moment where you wanted to strangle somebody, not literally, but
And I think of it a lot when I'm driving. I live in Atlanta and we have crazy highway driving here, like insane. So I think about it a lot on the highway because I'm not really like a road rage person, but I see people all the time that will get cut off and then other people follow them and they're honking their horn or they're waving their arms out the window. I literally have had this thought in my head. What is the difference between me and them? The difference is I may have that thought. I could drive after them and wave my arms around and look like a crazy person.
Right.
But I'm not going to. It may cross my mind, but I'm not going to do it. And that person, has a thought and they do it. It goes exactly to your point, but I look at the same as, I think I've even said that in a post, I look at eating the same way. So many times you get that urge to go and eat. You get that urge to eat the third or fourth piece of pizza, or maybe like go have a snack when you're not hungry. It's the same exact thing. It's an idea. We could do it. We could not. And that's something I did not have any comprehension of, that those were optional. I thought I had the thought, oh my gosh, I have to eat. Oh no, what am I going to do now? Something's wrong with me. And it's like, no, you just got to slow it down, become aware of the thought. A lot of times it's after the fact first, and then you can kind of evaluate what happened here. What do I do in the future?
I think most people don't realize that you can separate the two.
Yep.
I think that's common. That's why we have to have these conversations to normalize it. What do you think, either for you or for anybody that you've worked with, like, what do you think is the most helpful? Because I completely agree with what you said. It's slowing down. It's recognizing it. It gets easier with time. You start noticing and recognizing it. You still may decide to do the quote unquote wrong thing. I probably shouldn't say wrong, but I don't have a better word. But then it becomes a little bit easier over time to make a better choice, a healthier choice.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for everybody, it's a little bit different how they can kind of get that to click and like what makes that happen. Do you think it's more of a time thing, a practice thing? Like, what do you see when you're working with people?
So I think it's both. Repetition, 100%. Because if you do something, say 10 times a day, you practice that habit 10 times a day, you're going to get to that place a lot faster, regardless of if it's 10 days or 30 days. It's repetition for sure. But I also think setting kind of that intention and planning ahead of time is really key too. Because if you're always reactive, like it happened, oh no, like what am I going to do next time? You don't then spend any time thinking about it prior to that next situation. You're going to always be like behind with it. You want to actually, after it happens, make that intentional time to sit down and go through what was the exact situation? What happened in my mind? What did I actually do? What can I learn here? And then what do I actually want to happen next time? And when you get in that situation, you have to make that focused, intentional, conscious, and aware, because it's really easy. I even find myself doing it now. I always give this example because so many of us can relate. You go to a restaurant and it's like chips and salsa. It's so easy to talk. And especially if you're having a drink or you're with friends, and all of a sudden 4 baskets of chips are gone. And it's like, I always have to remind myself, because I still sometimes will catch myself doing it. When I get in that restaurant, I sit down and the food is in front of me, to like breathe and remember, I want to be aware of what I'm doing here. I want to pay attention. I don't want to just literally like mindlessly eat chips and shove them in my face when I'm not even tasting them. Making that intentional effort to stay in the moment, stay present, and keeping it top of mind. And it has to be a priority for you to do that too, because so many other things go on in life around you that if it's closer to the bottom of the list for you, it's going to be a lot harder for you to do that, to remember, to stay present, to stay aware, and to do the things.
I like that tip. I hadn't heard that before about sitting in the restaurant and actually like taking a minute to set intentions. And I think that's a really good one, because I don't think you typically do. Mm-hmm. I think you can go in with a plan, which is good. That is also helpful. But I think we both probably know that sometimes that plan can go out the window if you're not really careful about it. Like if you don't really be mindful of the situation. So,
and it's literally like, especially if it's a newer habit, we do forget. You sit down, you're like, oh my gosh, you're in a conversation. All of a sudden chips are gone. You've had 2 drinks. And you're like, oh my gosh. And then a lot of times what we do is we're like, oh, well, over now, start again in 2 weeks. So all those different points that we have that opportunity to shift it back, to turn it around. But it's easier not to. So many times we don't. But when we're aware of it, even after, say halfway through, when you're like, oh my gosh, I just caught myself doing all these things I didn't want to do, making that change then, making that next best choice versus waiting for 2 weeks, so much more progress than if you just would have decided, oh, okay, I had 2 drinks. I only want to have 1. I'm going to be good now versus I'm going to have 5 more, you know?
Yeah. You just hit on the topic I was going to go to, which was the all or nothing mentality, right? I mean, that's really what you talked about, just to put the label on it, because I think a lot of people struggle with that. I mean, we've all been there. You struggle with the thought that exactly what you said, like, okay, well, I messed up now. And again, whether it's food and diet or exercise or any other habit you're trying to change or bring into your life. And you can so quickly convince yourself that because you made that one bad choice or that one wrong choice, that, yeah, what the heck, you should just keep going down that path, versus immediately resetting and saying, wait, what did I really want to do here? And then shifting. So I think that's really, really important to bring up.
Yeah. And that all starts with even that like initial decision that I'm not going to live like that anymore. I'm not going to It's not going to be all or nothing for me anymore. And that's really what it was for me, is one, that awareness piece, but also that firm decision. It's not going to happen like that anymore. And actually meaning it too. We know when we say something, we're like, yeah, I kind of mean that, but maybe not. There's a little leeway there. You really have to have your own back with that when you make, and then when you find yourself in it, it's a little bit easier to make that choice because you know that you've already decided what you're going to do.
What do you think from the work that you've been doing? Like, what do you see as the most common pattern with people struggling to kind of make this mind shift? Because I think, like, you talked about this pivotal moment when your relationship went bad, and then you sort of took a minute to kind of think about what was going on. And most of the people I talk to, there's some big thing that happens. But for some people that are just trying to get there, and they've been trying to get there for years, like, what's the thing that can turn the light bulb for people? Like, what do you see as a pattern, or the thing that helps the most?
So to answer the first part of your question, I see one of the biggest challenges is going off track with just life things. Your schedule changes in the smallest way. Sometimes it's like, okay, I was supposed to be home at 6, but I got home at 7:30. I went through a drive-through, and then my whole week was that. So it's almost like, kind of just like we talked about, in a different way. It's that one decision, but then we let that turn into 20 more decisions. So it's trying to catch yourself before that one, but then if you don't, catching it for 2, 3, 4, and 5, and it goes back to that listening to your thoughts in your brain, because that's all it is. It's your brain going, it's okay. You can just go do this. And then you do that, and you're like, and now you're done. So just throw out all the healthy food and go to McDonald's. And it's noticing that, starting to talk back to it. No, we're not going to do that. And having strategies in place ahead of time can be helpful. But even if you don't, creating them as you go. You're listening to this podcast, and you're getting these ideas from us. So you can even start to implement that right away. Start listening to your thinking and evaluating, is this really what I want to be, and talking back to it. And that's really what can be super, super helpful.
You have to be honest with yourself. And I think that's a challenge for some of us to really look in the mirror. I think self-awareness and honesty is like a key, just like we said at the beginning, kind of put it out there, just like wear it on your sleeve, and just because then you can start dealing with it.
Yeah. Honesty is huge, and it's very hard, because when you start being honest with yourself, you have to deal with all the things that you didn't want to deal with. And that's typically why we overeat, we emotionally eat, because there's a lot of uncomfortable and challenging things that happen in life. And it's way easier to have a drink or go snack or whatever it is than to actually sit in it and process it and be with it. So that is a really hard piece of it. And we are all capable. And honestly, when you start to do it and you become less afraid of those challenging things, life opens up in a way that's absolutely insane, because you can go after anything and you're just not afraid of it anymore. There really is so much positive to doing that, but the journey to only feel a little uncomfortable.
You're very passionate about it. You really love it, I can tell. Could you have dreamed that this is what you would have been doing?
Kind of yes and no, I guess, because when I was at some of my lowest points, literally I can remember one time I had a major binge eating episode and was like in tears afterwards, and just remember thinking, not envisioning myself like as a health coach helping people, but more, if I ever figure out how to get out of this, I'm going to help people through it. Because it was just it felt hopeless, I think. So kind of, to answer your question, I think I felt like if I could get through it, I would do something with it. So I didn't know exactly what. If I figured something out, I was going to let other people know.
And what prompted you to stop being so honest with other people about it? I'm sure you had to be honest with yourself at first, but then to go out there and start telling your story, that's hard. That's brave. What let you do that?
Yeah, I think just kind of knowing that I do feel like I've gone through some of the things in my life for a reason. And I really believe that is to help other people, whether it's just seeing a post of mine. It's always crazy to me when I get like video or a post or something I shared, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't think anything of it. But they're like, yeah, that really resonated with me, or I was feeling that way, and thank you for sharing that. And I think those types of things help me to put it out there even more and more. I originally started my social pages a couple years ago just because I was always talking about health as I was learning things, probably more than a couple years ago now, because I wanted somewhere to put it other than just like texting my sisters when they didn't care. But then it turned into more and more of my story, because I was like, okay, I have this story, I have these thoughts, I have this journey. I'm going to put it somewhere, regardless. If it's going to help someone, amazing. If it's not, then it'll sit here either way. So I think it was definitely a transition and took some practice doing, but if it helps anyone, it's worth it. It's worth me going through like that little bit of discomfort or fear, whatever it is, to get out there. So
I love that. I have the belief that even if we reach one person when we have this conversation, and I do think we will, I know it's kind of corny, but I think that we wouldn't have gotten connected. Same thing, I think, with anybody I talk to. There's a gazillion podcasts, there's a gazillion people that want to be interviewed, and the right connections get made so that the right audiences get to hear them. So my thought is you will impact somebody here, even in this show. So I appreciate that. I will post all your links and contact info for everybody in the show notes. Is there any specific place where you're most active that they should look for you and watch out for you? Because you're kind of a little bit of everywhere, which is wonderful. But where do you feel like you're the most active?
Instagram. That is where I focus most of my attention. And it's just at Elena Nicole Health. So very simple, but Instagram for sure. I have videos on there. I do written posts if you like that better. So yeah, Instagram for sure.
Excellent. And before we close, is there any parting words of wisdom you want to share with the audience?
This sounds so corny, but I always try to share loving and liking yourself along the way, because that was something I struggled with for so long. I was waiting for the perfect number on the scale, the boyfriend, the perfect clothing or whatever it is to provide that for me. And if you can do that, work on that yourself first, it can help you go so much further faster, and it feels so much better. I think that's it.
That's a really good one. And I also think could be a whole episode, self-love. It's something that people have to do a lot of work on. But the common theme through all these things is that it's mindset. It's really about, like you said, when your own weight loss journey, it was less about what you were eating or how you were exercising, and it was doing the mind work that then helped it happen more effortlessly. Thank you so much. This has been great and very informative, and I'm sure we're going to touch a few people. So thank you again.
100%. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Message in the Middle with Marianne. If you enjoyed the podcast, please take a minute to share it and write a review, as it helps bring new listeners to our audience. If you'd like to keep the conversation going between episodes, please join us at Facebook group Message in the Middle with Marianne.